John, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Very glad to be here.
Yeah, very happy to have you. So, first off, why don't you tell me a little bit about data-driven marketing?
So, what we do is we help online businesses to generally between about 2 and 5 times their revenue through email marketing and funnels. And so that is normally a lot of our clients are online course businesses. We also work with e-commerce businesses. It's about how do you get more of your audience to convert to email subscribers, more of the email subscribers to convert to customers, and more of the customers to spend more money with you. And if you combine all of those together, the average results is normally about 2 to 5 times.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's cool. It doesn't work for everybody. Like our system is like aimed at a really specific audience who they've already got great products. They've already got a very low refund rate. They've already got a big audience somewhere organically, or it could be through ads, but often it's through YouTube or Instagram or podcast or whatever. They've got an audience already. They've got an email list, but they just don't know how to do the bit that we do. And so that's why we can come in and get people amazing results. Like we're good at what we do, but we're also quite picky about kind of who we're working with.
No, that's good to be selective because then you know who you'll be able to help and who's kind of who you might not be able to. Is that the intention of why you're picky?
Yeah, I got really sick of working with people where they weren't happy and we didn't get amazing results. We'd have some people who got amazing results and some people who got kind of okay results and they weren't delighted. And I was like, why don't we only work with the people who get amazing results? And that way, like if they need exactly what we do, then the whole thing works out well. And the downside to that is people come to us and say they want to work with us and we say no. And it's like it makes kind of the lead generation part of it a little different. But the plus side is that we only work with people where they're delighted with it and they get them incredible results. And therefore we can have just a good overall business.
Well, yeah, and that way you can kind of mitigate those expectations, of a company coming in and expecting you to make them an overnight success a little bit. And from all these people I've talked to in the e-commerce industry, that's never happened ever. And yet still people kind of have those expectations sometimes. Is that something that you've had to deal with?
Yeah, there's a lot of people who come to us and kind of they're expecting that our job is to build the whole business pretty much. And they're like, but I've already got, like, let's say it's an online course creator. They're like, I've already got expertise. Now make me rich. And the people we're generally helping are the ones who've spent years building up an audience. They share information. They've built up an audience of, let's say, 1 million people on YouTube. And they've built up amazing courses or they've got great products that they're selling through e-commerce. But they just don't know how to do that last part of connecting the two of those together. And then we can come in and like, it looks to people externally like we've made them an overnight success. Because we had a guy the other day and he's an architect by trade. And he was working with, he basically helps other architects to be able to run their business more efficiently. So like, how do you actually run an architecture business? What kind of clients do you take on? What kind of ways do you build the whole team, etc.? He's teaching people that. He's built up this YouTube audience of like 1 million people. But he was frustrated with the amount of money that he's making. And we were able to take him from what he was getting, which is about 25 grand a month, up to 120,000 in the second month he worked with us, which looks like overnight success, but he spent 10 years building the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So it's like, he's already put the hard graft in. He just didn't know how to turn it into the money at the end of it.
Yeah, I mean, he ran up to the edge of the cliff. He just needed someone to maybe give him a little push to jump off, So I'm curious about how you started data-driven marketing. How what was kind of the inspiration for this specific idea?
Yeah, so what I used to do was I worked in the fitness industry and I was helping get people into sport and activity. And so I was working with government, kickboxing clubs, gyms, hospitals, what have you. And I was building funnels for them to get those filled up. And what I found was that there's got such limited capacity that you could build a great system and then they get filled up and then they don't need you anymore, really. And it's like, I was looking for like, where is there that I could find an audience who has a more unlimited supply? So if you do better marketing, then the supply is still covered. And if you look at online businesses, e-commerce and online courses, that fits perfectly. It's like there's much easier to have a much bigger supply if you can really increase the demand. And so I started working out with e-commerce and online course businesses and helping them out with their funnels. I just found that this worked beautifully. It's a much better fit for me. Also, a lot of my friends, I was already in online business networks, and a lot of my friends were running those kind of businesses. So it was very easy to get started by talking with them and finding out, what kind of help did they need as well.
Mm-hmm. So you already had that network of reliable people who could give you advice in the space, or you could at least bounce ideas off of.
Yeah, and like when I started, what I do is I did free audits for them. I was like, let me go through your funnels and try and understand where you're losing money. And then some of them I went through and showed them, how they could do much better. And they were like, oh, great, cool. Can you just do it for us? So that was kind of how I got started with it. I was kind of, that wasn't the plan exactly. I was just like, oh, let me test out this concept. Mm-hmm. And then when I started talking with them, they wanted some help with it. So that's kind of how I got going.
Nice. And part of your background is in sales and mathematics, to mm-hmm. my understanding. Which is cool because, honestly, I was a math major in college for 4 years. I still had maybe a few classes and everything, and then dropped out to pursue music and then eventually media, and, took a total zag. But I've always loved math, and I think it's very fascinating that you have too, and still kind of in a math space, but also not really. So I'm curious how your background in math and sales equipped you to find success in this field.
Yeah, so the way a lot of people who run their own business think is not they're not that into the numbers. There's a lot of people who are very creative and problem solvers, and they've got ideas and they've got a vision, and they're the ones who are starting these businesses, and they're not focused on what does the data actually say. Mm-hmm. And what I found was, if you can get hold of all of the numbers, and one of the great things with online businesses is there's all of the numbers available. You've got Google Analytics and ActiveCampaign or ConvertKit for your email stuff, and you can go into various different bits of software and pull out the data of like what's actually happening. If you dig into that, there are these 80-20 opportunities just hidden within the business. So someone's already done all this creative work. They've built up an audience, or mm-hmm. they've built amazing products, or they've built systems that are working. They've managed to get success, but there's some of it that's working like way, way, way better than everything else they're doing. But they can't see that because they're not able to get into the data and try and analyze it and figure it out. And sometimes you can do that intuitively, but a lot more times, if you can get all the data in a spreadsheet and you are willing to go through and do pivot tables and analysis, and like, which most people they really don't want to do. If you're willing to do that and you find that kind of thing interesting, you can find these hidden opportunities. They'll tend to be a couple of the products will sell like 10 times more than everything else. Like, it's the whole 80-20 rule, right? You'll find like 20% mm-hmm, of the products mm-hmm. are selling 80, you're getting 80% of the results from it. But also you'll find 20% of the customers will spend 80% of the money. And so there's all these hidden opportunities there. So for example, if you're trying to increase revenue, the easiest way to do it normally is to sell something more expensive or to sell more things to your best customers. And very few people are doing that. They're like, let me just sell more of, just keep focusing on selling more of this standard offer. But some of those people are willing, like 10% of those people are willing to spend 10 times more money with you. And the data shows that's always true. Like, pretty much, you could pretty much always find a small segment of the market who are willing to spend 10 times as much as you're currently making from them. But you have to figure out, well, what are you offering them that's worth 10 times as much? Mm-hmm. And if you're willing to dig into the data and you find that, like, okay, cool. How can I find an offer that fits for these guys and sell that to them? So, for example, we had a coaching client, and he was selling courses around how to run Google ads for e-commerce business, so Google shopping ads. Okay. And he was making like a decent amount of money from that. And then we used this approach and we looked at, well, what was his most expensive clients like to, his best clients like to get? And he put together a coaching program. And so the coaching program allowed him to then double his revenue because 10% of people were spending 10 times as much money. Mm-hmm. Another example with it, so I was working with a guy, he's selling, it's like products for both trying to spy on other people and to stop other people spying on you. It's called the Spy Guy.
I like it.
Fascinating business, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to go and like, if you're getting a divorce and you want to like catch your ex-wife or the person you're looking at divorcing out with what they say, you get a pen that's a recording device, this kind of thing, right? And so I explained to him about the concept of these upsells. And in e-commerce, what you can do is something called order bumps. Very few people have it in place, but it's where someone's checking out, you offer them an additional product while they're checking out. And he came out with like, what's his most popular product that people would be likely to buy on a whim, just as they're checking out. And so it's relatively inexpensive. And he put that as an order bump. It was in Shopify and he was using a plugin for it. And he set that up and he made on average an extra $5,000 a month just from doing that.
Nice.
So there are these hidden little tricks if you know where to look and you know kind of how to figure out the data behind everything.
And it's fascinating because it seems like a lot of companies want to tap into the people who've never heard of them or any of the 100% of clients they already have, instead of focusing on that 10 to 20% that is making up a lot of that revenue. So part of your business model, at least on the website from some of my research, a lot of the companies you work with are courses, like you mentioned, a lot of educational courses, workshops, that sort of a thing. I'm curious about your opinion on that because I don't know a lot of, I don't, it might be oversimplified to call you like a marketing agency, but a lot of them don't focus on courses or usually it's just your pretty standard, maybe even a SaaS platform, retail, but not a lot of courses. I'm curious if you think that's an undertapped market or maybe why you work with so many, just because it's what, easy? They need someone. What's the reasoning behind that?
Like why we work with course businesses instead of other businesses.
Yeah.
So when I started out, I was working with everybody, SaaS, e-commerce, and online courses. And I still do work with SaaS businesses and I still do work with e-commerce businesses, but the main business, my whole team is focused just around online courses. And the reason for that was I figured if I was going to build up a team of people to be able to implement the systems that I built, it was going to be way easier if I niched down to just one of those different audiences. So I chose online courses because I found there's probably a bigger untapped market there in terms of there are people who have built up that giant audience. They've built amazing courses, but they have no idea about the email marketing and funnels side of things. And I don't know for definite why that seems to be worse there. It's not like it's great in e-commerce and it's not great in SaaS either. Like there's a lot of people who are missing out on a lot of money because they just don't know how to implement these kind of systems. They don't have order bumps. They don't have upsells. Their email marketing isn't good enough. Their systems for building up their email list aren't as good as they could be. But online courses, I found there was just the biggest kind of gap. And so I decided to focus in on that and I built up a team who was just working around that. And we keep doing this 80-20 idea within the business. And so we niche down to just online courses. And then we niche down to we went through all of the different tactics that we were running and we cut it down to just 8 tactics that worked the best. And then we were doing group coaching and a done for you service. And we're just in the process of cutting down to just doing the done for you service because that tends to work the best out of the two as well. And so it's like, just keep narrowing into like, what's the thing that gets the best results and cut everything else out, which is sometimes a little scary because you're like, the other thing's working okay. It's like, but this one's working great. Let's do twice as much of the one that's working great.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, in the creative space, they say, write without fear, edit without mercy. And in the business space, it's kind of the same thing. You want to make the biggest, best business possible, but at times you got to edit without mercy and just say, this isn't making money. This isn't, making your employees happy. This isn't making your clients happy, and just kind of like trim the fat. And that's a good opportunity to talk about your healthy, in my opinion, obsession with funnels and the importance that they can do in business. Can you kind of explain maybe to those who don't know what that is and why they are so important into businesses at large? Because you also mentioned some companies just don't want to deal with them or they don't want to put in the time, money, and effort to take advantage of them.
Yeah. So the funnels as an overall concept is like, how do you convert more of your audience, the people who get to your website or they see your ads or they see your YouTube videos, whatever, how do you convert more of them into buying customers and get them to spend more money with you? That's the process. That's what kind of funnels is. And the reason it's important is because it's generally the biggest gap that people have got. It's the space in the market where they've got the biggest gap between what they are doing and what is actually possible. And if you make that work really well, everything else gets easier. Let's say that you're running ads at the moment and the ads aren't very profitable. You're just about making enough money with it. You're making a little bit of profit from them, but you're like, do I keep running them? I've got to pay some guy to run the ads for me. Am I making enough money from it? Oh, iOS 14 made things get harder. If you have a better funnel, if you have a process that works better, that gets more of the people who get to your sales page to get to the checkout page, more of the people who get to the checkout page to buy, the people who buy to buy more from you, then you can make, let's say, an extra 50% revenue from every person who gets to your sales page. All of a sudden, ads gets really easy because now you're getting 50% more revenue from every click through. Well, that means that you can afford to spend a whole bunch more money. You're making the whole thing much more profitable. If you can double that instead of 50%, then the whole thing allows you to scale massively. And so that's why this matters, is because it's the part of the business that is generally not looked at, not worked on enough, and it makes everything else easier. You can, if you're making enough money, you can afford to buy more traffic. There's a saying from Ryan Dice over at Digital Marketer: whoever can afford to spend the most per customer wins. And the way you do that is by increasing the conversion rate of your funnels.
No, I subscribe to that, saying too. It's interesting. I think that, like, at least in my opinion, I always see sales funnels as something. So from an outsider's perspective, I own a freelancing business now and have owned a production company in the past and everything. But still, from an e-commerce outsider, it seems obvious that you want to convert as many customers as possible. But the fact that it isn't is kind of a testament to how complicated e-commerce businesses as a whole can be. You in terms of building the product, getting it into people's hands, trying to keep everyone happy and afloat. And it's an extremely complicated industry. So I'm kind of curious what sort of success you've been able to give people in terms of explaining these sales funnels, how they work, and then actually helping them find success. I'm curious if you have any other specific examples of that.
Yeah. So one of the crucial things here is it can be really complicated, but there are certain fundamental things that if you do, they always work, and most people are missing them. So, for example, when you've got your checkout page, there's like 6 things that you should have on your checkout page that get the checkout page to convert way better. And most people are missing them. So we had this guy as a client, Cody, and he had these basic checkout pages and they were missing all of these different elements. And we put these in place, and it between 2 and 10 times his conversion rate on his checkout pages. So for those particular products, he was making between double and then 10 times as much money. So the kind of things we're looking at here, it's not rocket science, but it can be overlooked, when people are focusing on all of the clever tactics, anything that sounds fancy, what have you, instead of focusing on the fundamentals. So these are things like have testimonials on the checkout page. Someone's made it all the way through to the checkout page and they're excited about buying, but they're kind of nervous. It's like, oh, the plastic meets the road here. They're about to actually spend their hard-earned money on it. You have to make sure they feel comfortable and confident that they're actually making the right decision. So you want to have testimonials on that page. You want to have a money back guarantee and make that really, really obvious. Nice big badge saying, whatever you've got, 30-day, 7-day, whatever it is, money back guarantee. You want to have a picture of the product if you can. Now, it's not always possible with e-commerce because you've sometimes got like multiple products in the checkout thing, but some way of making them feel like, yes, I'm definitely buying the right thing here. I'm not just spending this money and I actually accidentally put the wrong thing in the basket. You want to have trust badges. So things like, SSL, show picture of, yes, we accept Visa, MasterCard, American Express, what have you.
That's big for me,
And
honestly.
yeah, it's like it just makes you feel more comfortable at that point
Yeah.
when you're actually about to spend your money. You want to feel like, oh yeah, this is definitely safe. This is definitely secure. I'm definitely going to get my thing. If I'm not happy with it, I can get my money back for it.
Mm-hmm.
Other people who bought this thing were happy with it and they feel that it actually got them the result they were after. Great, I'll go ahead and make my purchase.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of thing, when you put that in place, you do these fundamentals consistently throughout the whole process, and you can really get dramatically better results. Now, if you're only missing one of those things, okay, you're not going to double your checkout rate. But if you improve it by 5% or 10%, and then you do something else on the sales page, like sales pages, there's 15 crucial elements to a high-performing sales page, and most people are just missing a bunch of them. So you've got things like a headline that grabs people's attention, a sub-headline that shows them their more of the benefit of what they're getting, a call out to the audience so the people who are the perfect fit know, yes, this is definitely for me. I'm the right person. This is the product that actually is appropriate for people like me. You want to have benefits on there, not just features. And then you want to have the features to explain why the benefit actually gets you the result. You want to talk about the pain the person's feeling, testimonials from people. So all of these things, right, make a good quality sales page, and people just don't always have them. And when you put those kinds of things in place, then everything works much better. Now, I get that people find this difficult and uncomfortable because it's not why they got into this industry in the first place. You know, maybe they absolutely love this kind of product that they're making, or they really like the product side of things, and they're not used to writing sales pages. And so, but it's like, but this is a part of the business. Figure something out here. Like people can like hire us and we do this kind of thing, or they can hire a freelance copywriter who's good in that particular area and give them that list of make sure we've got all 15 of these, or learn to do it themselves. It's like all of these work, but you have to do it. It's part of the process, you know?
You're preaching to the choir there, John, because like in obviously something like this job and my last job, and when I was doing the music thing, it's like I have now gotten to the point where I don't love having to do the marketing for something because I've had to do it so much in the past. But at the same time, I know what it looks like and I know what is necessary. So if I needed to, I could do the bare minimum because I know that is the bare minimum that I need, even though I don't want to do it, or I know how to and what to delegate to someone for what I need, because I'd rather focus on the work, the creative, the content than the actual marketing of it. So you're totally right. And I'm trying to echo that with personal experience, honestly. I'm curious what sort of trends you see moving forward in this space. People, I talk with a lot of digital marketing agencies, but not one as kind of specific as yours in terms of the online courses, the focus on sales funnels, obviously very big on data transparency. I see that is growing exponentially in the next few years across the space. A lot of people that I talk to are saying that is going to be like kind of a number one thing moving forward is like, no one wants to work with you if you don't have data transparency in the future. I don't know if that's the case right now. I'd love to hear your opinion on that.
Yeah, I mean, the things that I see overall in terms of the trends, I see a massive amount of professionalization of these industries happening. It was a bit of the Wild West, and it still is to a certain extent, with online business, because anybody could get into it, anybody could start it. There wasn't like much of a requirement. And over time, that has got to the point where the standards are higher. And there's more people who are coming in who are like business people or people who've built up a business who are like, great, I know how to do this. And they're like, let me go into another industry. Let me actually do that to a higher standard. You look at FBA, right? Fulfilled by Amazon businesses. And 10 years ago, you could just jump in and start selling stuff and it didn't really matter kind of how good you were because there was just this massive available space in the market. And nowadays you have to be pretty bloody good at it, to do it, to make it work. And I'm seeing that happen kind of gradually. And there's still massive gaps between where generally the industry is and what is what's like a really high level of professionalism, where every role is done by someone who has years of experience and there's great training about it, what have you. And I think that gap's really exciting, because if you can go, right, I'm going to take advantage of that gap and get good at this thing that other people aren't doing, then that allows you to leapfrog other people to get much further ahead. I was watching a talk. I was at a conference on the weekend, and I was watching a talk from this guy who'd been running a Amazon business and e-commerce with, I think, a third of the business through Amazon. And he was selling, like, it was a fitness brand, and he was showing how they'd done stuff to a like way, way, way higher standard than everybody else. And they'd managed to get international athletes, but who weren't so well known, in their videos for their fitness brand. And it was like, and they recorded it to a really high standard. And it wasn't just like, oh, the description isn't half-assed and written badly. It's like the descriptions, everything is perfect. And we're now upping it by having this branding kind of element to it, by bringing these different kind of athletes, right? And that didn't used to be the case in those kind of places. From the data point of view, I still see that as a massive gap. Like, most people are doing it to I could just about get away with doing this much looking at the data. I just about kind of cope with it, instead of like, oh, how can we make this incredible? Like, so when I started this business, I hired a data scientist who was like fresh out of college. Like, he wasn't super expensive at the time, but it's like, how can I get someone who really loves spreadsheets, like to a point which is unhealthy, How can I get someone who just loves digging into all of this data and loves understanding what exactly is going on and can do things that most people don't even realize is possible, instead of, oh, I took a course in Excel on the weekend and that'll do, kind of thing. It's like,
oh yeah.
That, and I think that's one of the gaps, that people just don't recognize how powerful that is. And in like another 10 years, that will become like a normal thing. That people are like, right, great. Of course, we have to understand all these things to this high of a level. And at the moment, people are like, oh God, I have to go and I've got Google Analytics, but I never even look at it. That's kind of more what I see at the moment.
I'm curious if this is something that has come up on numerous shows in the past, and I'm curious in your opinion about it, John. Do you think it is more, I'll frame this two different ways. Do you think it's more valuable to kind of be a jack of all trades when it comes to your knowledge, or a total master of one? And my follow-up to that would be, do you see one of those being more valuable in the future?
So I think as the business owner, jack of all trades is way better. And because you have to be. When you're starting a business, it's so hard. There's so many elements to it that you've got to be the one who goes in and learns how to do all these different things. I just don't see that working other ways. But later on, once you've got the business further on, what you can start to do is take, right, these are the individual parts of my job. Let me find someone who's way better at this bit than I am and hire them just to do that. Now let me take another area. Okay, maybe it starts off with bookkeeping, but eventually you get to the point of going, right, I now need somebody who's really great at design, someone who's really great at copywriting, who's great at sales pages, who's great at email design, whatever. And you take all those parts out and start to ship them out to everybody. So as the business scales, it actually changes. I think this is really hard. A lot of my entrepreneur friends really struggle with this, because they've deliberately had to get themselves to think about, I'm going to do everything myself and learn how to do everything myself. And that's how they got the business started. And then later, they have to get themselves to stop doing that. Because now that's not the appropriate tactic, but it's such a mindset shift. It's such a different way of looking at business. It's funny. I was chatting with a friend about that. The original expression, a jack of all trades, is a jack of all trades and a master of none, right? And I mentioned to her that the original expression from like Shakespeare's day was a jack of all trades and a master of none is often better than a master of one. Yeah. So that's the full original expression, right? And I said this to her, and she goes, "Oh, Google that expression." I was like, "Why? I'm sure I'm right. That's what the original was." She says, "No, Google it." I'm like, "What? Why do you want me to Google it?" She just Google it. So I Google it, and it turns out she ranks number one for an article she wrote on Forbes about that expression.
You were trying to teach the teacher about what
exactly.
That's pretty cool. But you're totally right. I mean, it's often kind of miscontextualized. I mean, even knowing that, it's like a natural inclination to say, just that first piece of it. And kind of in a weird way, that circles back to this data transparency we're talking about, where it's kind of like, just do the bare minimum, or do what's expected, or do what's kind of like, what is culturally appropriate in terms of, instead of surpassing that, or really kind of like going above and beyond. I also wanted to mention, John, that I worked with an entrepreneur who had to start a project and did like everything himself, and then got to the point where he still wanted to do a lot of that teeny stuff that you're talking about, the stuff that was at that point way below his pay grade. And I always found it really interesting, because it was like, we can do this. Your team can do this. Honestly, you've got more important stuff to do. How do you kind of approach an entrepreneur with that? Because sometimes, the boss wants to do what the boss wants to do. It's their company. They can do what they want. But there's also that delicate line of, you have so much more important stuff to do. You got to learn how to delegate some of the more menial stuff to your team, despite how much you might want to do it.
Yeah, the concept I found most useful for this, and I've seen help other people as well, is a concept explained in the 80/20 sales and marketing book from Perry Marshall. And he talks in there about $10 an hour work, $100 an hour, $1,000 an hour, and $10,000 an hour work. So instead of splitting it and thinking of like 10 versus 30 or versus 35, it's like 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. And he has listed out examples of what kind of work counts as $10 and what kind counts as $100. And his point in there is, can you figure out, so overall you earn a certain amount per year, right? Let's say you're earning $100,000 from running a business. Within that year, within all the work you do, some of the work you do is incredibly valuable, and it's making you most of the money. And a lot of it is almost completely useless, and you could just outsource it and get somebody else to do it. And the problem comes, I think, or one of the problems is, a lot of people who run businesses want everything to be done exactly the way that they would do it, instead of figuring out what's the 80/20 here, which bits need to be done amazingly. Like, you absolutely must have the best quality product, and you absolutely must do, let's say, my belief, great funnels. Like, at least do it well, but ideally do a really good job of that. And which things, if it's done like 60% as well or 70% as well, it's okay. It doesn't matter so much. Which are the bits like that you can let go of? And the thing that I see people really struggle with is the feeling like everything has to be done to their standard immediately, or it can't work. And so I think that's one concept of it, like, which thing doesn't matter so much. And then the second part is, if you can find somebody who can take that thing that you hate, or that you're not the best at, it's not your area of total expertise, not your area of genius, and take that off your hands, eventually they'll probably get to do it better than you. It won't happen straight away, but if you give them some time and space to do it, then they could probably do it better than you. And so Dan Sullivan's got this system that he talks about. I forget the exact names of it, but the basic concept is, you've got stuff that you really suck at and you hate doing. You've got stuff that you're kind of all right at, you're kind of mediocre. Some things that you do really well, and some things that are like your total area of genius, and you absolutely love it and you're brilliant at it. And he's like, as much as possible, the idea is you try and get towards the areas of genius. It's like, so those are the areas where you have the biggest impact on the business. And anything that you really hate, you get rid of. Anything that you're mediocre, you get rid of. And some of the things that you're just good at, or you're great at but you don't love doing, you get rid of those as well. Not all of them necessarily. It depends. There's nuance, but that's the kind of basic concept. And I find that kind of helps people as well to let go of stuff a little bit. But it's a very hard mindset thing to make that shift and to start to think about this.
I mean, you have to like rewire your own behavior. I mean, it does not take long at all to form a habit, and then you have this habit, and to then undo it, it's complicated, and it's very internalized and personalized, because it's like mine. And I don't know, I think there's just something very interesting in that, regardless of how big or small it is. And I really like your answer, because even the stuff that you're good at, sometimes it's better to just outsource, and then So you can focus on those things that you're great at. And I don't know, I just really, that was a well thought out answer. I'm curious, before we kind of wrap up, if there was, I don't know, maybe a time when a client's project, or even a project of yours, didn't really go the way that you wanted it to, or mistakes were made. How do you kind of handle that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a load of times. It happens a lot less now, partly because we don't take on clients where we don't think it's going to absolutely, work brilliantly, right? And I mean, I've seen it happen a lot of times with coaching clients, because there's a big gap between someone saying that they want to learn how to do something and them actually being willing to learn how to do it. Mm-hmm. So I see that come up a lot. Like, so we've got, okay, I'll give you some examples, right? So our coaching program, we've got someone who's gone through that, who she went from making like about $200,000 a year to making 2.4 million a year. And she was just like, she went through the course and she implemented everything ruthlessly, and she was just on it, and she hired a team for helping with stuff, and she was so organized, and she implemented everything. She came on every single coaching call and she implemented every single thing. And then we've got like, I don't know, 70-80% of people who go through the coaching who just don't actually do most of it. They're like, oh, okay, I'm not too, maybe I'll do some of this, maybe I'll do some of that. And they don't go through the course properly, and they don't come on all the calls, and they don't do all of the work. And so what we're doing there is we're cutting the coaching program. We're just getting rid of this because it doesn't always work. And so we're moving to just focusing on the done for you, because the done for you side of things really, really works. Other places I've seen stuff not really work. Yeah. So another one I think has been where we listen to clients too much. So if a client comes to us and they say, I want to hire you guys to do a done for you service, and then they have a list of ideas of different things that we could do, then what's really easy is for the team to say, okay, and to do the things the client's asked for, which kind of seems reasonable. But we get paid based on results. We don't get paid based on the work that gets done. We get paid on what results it gets them. So actually what happens is the client's unhappy because they didn't actually make as much more money as we were talking about them making. And we're not happy because we're not making as much more money, and therefore we're not making more money either. And so what we've started doing is getting really ruthless with people with that. Someone comes to us and they say, let's do this welcome sequence. And we say, well, the welcome sequence is only the 7th most effective thing that we could work on. We've got this email promotion we need to run this month. That's going to bring in the money. Then we basically say no to them. And we say, like, we can, but we're not going to do that as part of our agreement. We'd have to charge you extra for it. And really, we recommend against doing it. Like, just don't do that. Focus on doing this thing that works. And what then happens is, because we make them so much extra money, a lot of times after that, people kind of calm down and they're like, oh, I have all these ideas and things I've thought of, but I see that what you're doing is working. Okay, let's do the thing that you're talking about. That takes a little bit of time to build up that trust with people, but that's happened loads of times. And so the mistake on our part was saying yes too easily to people, trying to be helpful when what people really want is to make more money. And they don't really, no one's going to remember whether the thing you did was what they asked for or not. It's they remember whether it actually worked or not.
No, absolutely. And I think that's the point right there. I mean, I working in production, the best sets I've been on have been like best idea wins, because it's like what serves the vision, what serves the art, the TV show, the movie, the best. Because the result is kind of how you feel about it. It's a little more qualitative than it is quantitative. But in the e-commerce space, it's as simple as what gets the results. You can look at something and see what you wanted to do and what I wanted to do. What I wanted to do ended up getting the results, and that better than what you wanted to do. Not to gloat or anything like that, but it's so fine of a point of like, at the end of the day, what you want and don't want to do doesn't matter, because this is getting the results. It's like forcing ego to be put aside a lot of times. And I think there's something very fascinating about that. A lot of obviously e-commerce professionals that I know don't have a lot of ego, if I'm being honest, for at least the ones that I've talked to, because they have to learn that skill of putting it to the side and saying, you know what, this person was right because I have visual, factual evidence of that. Is that something you've seen? Is that accurate? I mean, you've been in the industry and talking to a lot more people and working with more people than I have. I'm curious if you kind of see the same thing in terms of people being able to be more team focused in this arena because of its quantitative results.
Well, I see it sometimes. I see it with the people who manage to get their ego out of the way do tend to do much better.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I see a lot of people who they haven't managed to do that. Like, I feel like I've managed to an extent kind of almost beat it out of myself, because I'm the same, right? I have all these ideas that I am convinced are genius.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, we're going to do it like this, and this is going to work brilliantly. And then you do the thing, and then you measure the result, and you look at it and you go, oh, I was wrong again for another reason that I hadn't considered in advance. Like, if the world had worked the way I thought it did, maybe this would have been a great idea, but it turns out it wasn't. And out of those, only this tiny proportion of things actually work. If you actually measure it and you look at the results, then you go back and you think, did I make a good decision? Did I make a bad decision? If it was good, why? Was it luck? Was it judgment? Is there somewhere I can replicate that kind of thing? And I try and do that. And it's like, it's difficult because it's emotionally unpleasant to admit how many times you're wrong about things, you know? But I do see the people who are a lot of times the most successful have learned that they're not it's not that they're not as smart as they think they are. It's that maybe the world's more complicated than they thought it was. And that they look at stuff and say, well, I've got this idea, maybe it'll work. Let's test it and find out, and let's see. And then we'll look at the results afterwards. And it seems like it makes sense based on all the evidence that we have, but who knows for definite until we actually go ahead and do it. Mm-hmm. And I find that allows you to be to get much better results, because then it's not about, was I smart? Was I right? Did people agree with me? What have you? It's about, like, what does the data show and what's actually effective?
Absolutely. Well put. Before we wrap up, John, I always ask my guests the same last question. In this space, it is high stress, high anxiety, and I think it requires a lot more mental health upkeep and work-life harmony, work-life balance. Curious what sort of hobbies and interests you have in your free time, John, to make sure that you are keeping your mental health in focus.
Yeah, so I do I work out. I find that really helps. I go and do CrossFit. It's quite often horrifically brutal. But at the end of it, I feel calmer. I actually learned the other day, I was watching some podcast on YouTube, and I heard that cortisol, which is like the stress hormone, can get sweated out through when you sweat from like workouts. Well, I don't know, maybe it's from anything. The cortisol actually leaves your body, and that's part of why you feel calmer afterwards. But that, I don't know, whatever the reason is, it helps me a lot. After I work out, I feel like way calmer. I do a lot of meditation. I find that's really useful in terms of just trying to slow my brain down. Like, instead of it jumping around from this thing to that thing, just try and settle everything and calm everything down again. I read the Daily Stoic. If you know that book, it's like a bunch of Stoic quotes each day. It's from a guy called Ryan Holiday, who's been trying to popularize Stoicism again. And I find that quite helpful in terms of just keeping calm about a lot of different things. And I went through there's an amazing mindset program that I went through a little while ago. It's called The Arena. It's from a guy called Itamar Marani. And he's ex-Israeli Special Forces and a complete and utter badass, like used to be number 7 in the world at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And he does this entrepreneur mindset program where he helps people to figure out like what their mental blockages are and what they can do about them and how they can get their head in the right order and have an effective mindset. And like if anybody's interested in that, I think it's itamarmarani.com. And that is legit. I mean, it's not easy because he's quite intense and it's like a really intense process to go through. But I found that really, really helpful.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, you got a lot going on, and a lot of it seems like mindfulness, and I think that's pretty cool. John, thank you so much for coming on the show. Until next time, my friend. Thanks a lot.
Awesome. Thanks, man.